Thank you all so much for joining us today. So this is an opportunity here on behalf of the intersection, on behalf of Dr. Barlow and Dr. Mero Lopez. We're interested and we're really motivated into exploring a lot of the discourses surrounding first-generation college students, first-generation teaching, first-generation administration, and just basically even first in family. And a lot of this will be an opportunity to share our experiences and how they intertwine. And it's a great chance for us to kind of bridge together our experiences and really give life to the meaning of what it means to be a first generation, first in our families to pursue many tracks here in academia. So I'd like to start off first in just this general conversation here is let's do some introductions first and then a little bit about your background. And so that can include things like what's your current major, your current position, when did you first come to Las Vegas, and if you weren't Vegas born, perhaps where were you from geographically, and also interestingly, what did or do your parents do for a living as well? And so we could start in any order we could proceed from.
I'll go ahead and take it since I'm probably the youngest one here. My name's Tavion Carter, and I am a first-gen student here at UNLV. I was born in Los Angeles, California. I was brought here by my mother in 1995, and this is my senior year. I cannot wait to graduate. My current major is communications, and so I was raised here in Las Vegas, went to many high schools out here, and am a product of CCSD. I am glad to say I made it out. And my parents, my mother works at the airport currently. My father is a stay-at-home dad.
Awesome. Excellent.
I am Javon Johnson. I am assistant professor and director of African American African Diaspora Studies here at UNLV. I also teach in gender and sexuality, and I do a little grad courses in various departments from time to time. My major was communication studies, interestingly enough, as an undergrad, and my master's was also in communication studies. My PhD was in performance studies, and I got a certificate in gender and sexuality studies and a cognate in African American studies. I like to say to people really quickly, just to sort of chart my academic trajectory, I found African American studies through performance studies, which I found performance studies through communication studies. And so what I like to think I do in the world is I'm interested in the performance of black folks, both on, off the stage, and everywhere in between, and what that communicates in the world is the best way to sort of like put me in a nutshell. So I came to Las Vegas, a little over 2 years ago for this job. They pulled me away from a position I had at San Francisco State. Partially was the cost of living. San Francisco was just, it's high. There's really I think it is the highest city, at least major city, and it recently topped New York, but it's expensive. And so the cost of living, searching for a more research-oriented institution sort of brought me here, and a good friend of mine, Mark Padungpat, who teaches also in IGES, we were friends prior to, was like, apply to the job, and so I applied to the job. I was born and raised in South Central Los Angeles, 1980s, 1990s, South Central Los Angeles. Most of my family still live there. And it's, interestingly enough, the place where I feel most safest in the world. And my mom works for the county for social welfare services. And my stepfather, who actually raised me, is no longer with us, but he was a truck driver and a pastor.
Mm. Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm Joe Miata. I serve as Vice Provost of Educational Outreach here at UNLV. I have been here 2 years. I came from the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque, where I served in 10 different jobs over 32 years at that institution. Yeah. I was recruited for the job here, and that's how I wound up here. So September 1st made 2 years for me. I wasn't born in Albuquerque. I was born in a small town in northern New Mexico, 30 miles south of Taos, called Peñasco. Mm-hmm. But I didn't grow up there. My parents, soon after they had me, moved to the big city, to Albuquerque. So I grew up there, went to high school, started at the University of New Mexico, didn't do very well, nearly flunked out. And I didn't want to go to UNM to begin with. I wanted to go to Arizona State because I had family in Phoenix, and that was the sexy place to go in terms of going to school. So I told my parents that's where I wanted to go, and their response was, no, mijito, go to UNM a couple of years, then we can talk about it. Like the whole keep the family nearby thing.
Right.
And so I had to plot my escape. So I went fall, spring, summer, fall, spring, summer. That fall I laid out. I saved money. I applied to ASU. I applied financial aid. I got dorm space. And so after Christmas, I sprung it on my mom that I was moving to Phoenix and going to ASU. So they really couldn't object because everything was already lined up. So I did. And I did much better on my own there. Being first generation, in my mom's family in particular, I was the first one to finish high school, let alone go on to college. So there was zero experience in terms of how to get me into college, how to navigate the whole system. I had to learn that all on my own. And I think there was one person that you meet people and they set you on a path and it just massively changes the course of your life. That was the high school counselor. Her name was Adelaida Sanchez. And they called me in the office one day and said, with these grades, what are you planning to do? I don't know, go to college. And she says, what have you done about that? I says, nothing. So she pulled a stack of paper and we started filling it out. She asked my social security number. I said, I don't have one. So she gave me the paperwork to fill out, take it into the office, and she says, come back when you have a number. So about 6 weeks later, I went back, and she helped me apply and get into the university. Okay, and not only that, I won a scholarship, unknown, I didn't even know. Okay, I didn't know you could apply for scholarships. Okay, so I got into UNM and floundered the first couple of years, transferred, did better, then graduated with an accounting degree from ASU, and then we moved back. By then I was married. We moved back to Albuquerque. I took a job as an accounting tech with the university, thinking, oh, I'll stay 2 years and move on. And there I was 32 years later when I came here. Yeah.
No, it's interesting. So, like, you say that, and because my mother and my stepfather both have high school diplomas, but that's it. And so I also had this sort of navigate, like, my mother, by and large, left me alone because she had no clue how to help me do this. And so it was always this sort of figuring it out for myself. Sort of same kind of thing. Mine wasn't a counselor. Mine was a high school teacher, but very similar. Like, what are we doing?
Exactly, yeah.
And I got into a ton of schools and didn't even apply to financial aid because in my mind, there was no way we could pay it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, like, I got into schools, and it was like, oh, it's cost $35,000 a year to go here. My mom didn't even make that.
Yeah.
How could I expect that for me?
You thought it through further than I did. I didn't even. I was just applying. I hadn't even thought about how we would pay for it.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
That didn't even occur to me.
Yeah.
Okay. I was totally lost in that regard.
Yeah.
Man,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
And I think for me, my parents were high school dropouts. They're both GED.
Okay.
So my mom worked as a salon owner, and I think that's where I got my entrepreneurial drive from. And then my dad was a heavy equipment operator. He was a construction worker. He got a job with the union. And from our perspective as a family, all of a sudden we were rich.
Right,
We had a union job, and we had health care. Yeah, made a big difference.
Wow, thank you for that. My name is Carlos Flores. I'm in my second year here as an assistant professor in residence with the Department of Communication Studies at UNLV, and I teach primarily classes in rhetoric and criticism and in critical and cultural studies. And part of how I ended up here was in all essence the job market fresh out of being a PhD is just really tough to navigate, and so there's a lot to discuss. Being first gen as a faculty member, there's so many uncertainties to navigate there. But coming to Las Vegas and being part of the fabric here at UNLV has really introduced me to a level of grit that students have that I had never experienced before, and it's that grit of students that I enjoy learning from, and I enjoy seeing them thrive. And it's really telling in terms of how all of our experiences, especially we're so interconnected here, especially with us three having grown up in Los Angeles. Like, I grew up in Koreatown for the first 13 years, and like, yeah, it was just, it's really crazy to hear about that. And then you and I went to the same university, at Arizona State University. And so it's just nice to see like all of our fabrics woven together at various junctures in our lives, especially when it comes to what my parents did. My parents did very little bit of college back in Central America and Honduras, and they moved here in 1984 to start up a life for my brothers and I. And so I had the great fortune of being born here in the States and had a lot of access to opportunities, and at the same time also some roadblocks in terms of figuring some things out for myself, like how to apply for college, how to apply for grad school, how to apply for my first job, and a lot of that would feel very empowering, but then a lot of times also it could feel very challenging and could be constraining. But my mom is a stay-at-home grandma to 3 grandchildren, and my dad does taxes, and so he's been doing the tax game, and he's been hustling for the last 40 plus years doing taxes and being an accountant. And so, yeah, we've had some really great beginnings with my parents and I, and both my older brothers. But yeah, that's essentially the trajectories that I'm really glad that we all got to share. So when it comes to our early college years, when was it that you all decided to go to college? And probably for some it might have been during high school with your counselor or teacher, but kind of around like what, I guess, age or age range or year range did you decide to take up college?
I would say I was a sophomore in high school, where once again, like my counselor came to me and was like, "Hey, you're a pretty good student. You have good grades. We should probably think about going to college." And the high school that I went to was Legacy High School, and it was kind of college preparatory a little bit. And it didn't really dawn on me that there was higher education past high school. It was more so like, okay, high school, maybe there's military, maybe there's just going to the workforce, but I was given these new avenues to explore, and so I guess from there, that's when I realized, okay, there's something more to achieve. There's something more to look forward to. So yeah, I would say about sophomore year is when it was dawned upon me that college was an opportunity to.
Yeah. For me, it was I never knew a time when I wasn't going to college. So as interesting as it, so as horrific as we know Bill Cosby is in this particular moment, what was important, I think, about particularly A Different World, right, was that in the early 90s, we saw a TV show with all black students. And that was profound for me, right? This idea that college wasn't this, so part of like what irks me now and would have always sort of bothered me even before I began to go to college as a student and teach as a faculty member, is this idea that a lot of black families teach their children almost like college is kind of like this magical thing, right? This dream, as it were. And certainly that isn't true of all black families, and I do think a lot of that is changing in this particular moment, but I'm talking about more so back then. And for me, I never saw it as a dream. I saw it as a necessary next step. For whatever it is that I wanted to do in the world. And so, I always knew college was on the horizon. I didn't know how to get there, didn't know much of what to do to get there, but I knew it was always a necessary step. Even though I actually initially wanted to go into the workforce because my family was largely poor and wanted to help them make money and make ends meet as a kind of responsible older son thing. But yeah.
See, that I could identify with as sort of the same thing. It was always, I was the oldest of three brothers, and I was the one with the most brains, doing well in school. So it was always assumed that I was going to go to college. But there was the huge disconnect was there was no plan, no thought through about how you get there. Okay? Right. And like you, I took a job when I was 16 just to help bring in money for the family, a combination of help with the groceries, and I had my own spending money for a change, that sort of thing. But from that assumption, even in high school, I think I was already, a junior? No, I was a senior. When the counselor came to me and said, "What are you doing with these grades, what are you doing about college?" Nothing, So while the dream was still there and the thought was still there, zero had taken place to achieve that until the counselor came along.
Yeah. And same, I was always told, "Oh, you're smart, college."
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be there.
Yeah, I was kind of in that same boat, like thinking at 16, because at the time my brother was fresh out of the Marine Corps, and I thought like, oh, that wouldn't be cool to go. And my brother said, "I will kick your butt if you go to the Marine Corps," and eventually fell out of love with that. But then also pivoting to my second brother who went to college, he got his degree in business, and I tried business, and then I didn't do so well because math and comm studies, all that, the typical myth of dropping out of business for a communication degree. But then I fell in love with the major, and part of it is that same thing. It's just like, it's not if, but like when you go to college, because a lot of that rested on having had high school mentors who saw my grades and were just like, "Hey, like, let's get you started." And it was just like, oh, okay. Like, at that point, it was just kind of like a very, eventually became a fluid trajectory along the way. And so I was really fortunate that in that same light, having like people in high school right away to kind of prop me up and like think like, these are the things that you could do. But also at the same time, being close to home and making sure we keep the family together, so to speak. And so my college was a hot 20 minutes away from home, and 20 minutes without traffic.
2 hours with.
Yeah, 2 hours. And so I'm curious to know, what were your all's first days on campus like? If you think back to your first time as an undergrad, what was it like being on a college campus for the first time, and what was it like navigating that?
Well, I told Dr. Flores this. So, a funny story for me is that the actual, like, so we all have our freshman orientations. I actually slept through freshman orientation. Like, I missed it completely. And just giving a little background, my senior year was pretty rough. I actually didn't know if I was actually going to continue the dream of attending college because of being partially homeless as far as like, because I was out of my mom's dad house at 17. So I was like couch surfing, trying to find my way, just through Vegas. And for me, I had a very rocky start my freshman year. So if we're just pertaining to the question, my first day was hell. Like I didn't know where I was, what my classes were, just trying to navigate just through the campus. And I have to give a quick shout out to Kamisha Johnson because she's actually the one that recruited me to come to UNLV. And is also my academic advisor. She has been with me through all the years that I've been here and has been an advocate for me as well as a student. She's amazing. And if it was not for her and for also like my support group, I would not be here sitting with you guys, you gentlemen, today. It's been good though. I just don't want to keep rambling along, but.
My first day was real simple. I don't have a real bad first day story. Like I ended up going to a community college. Like I said earlier, I actually got accepted in quite a few universities. Just nothing in my mind dawned on me that we would get enough financial aid to cover it. Nothing. So I didn't even apply. And so I was like, okay, well, not going to any of them, yay, but for acceptances, right? And so I ended up going to a community college. And the way the California community college system is set up, you can literally go get a piece of paper back then, but I imagine it's all digital now, and it will tell you exactly what classes to take to get to exactly which UC and CSU you wanted to go to. And I was like, cool, great, I'm going to take these classes. See y'all when I see y'all. I want to say I paid a few $100s. Like it was like really cheap back then. I think I paid like $300 and some change for my first semester. The books were more expensive than the class, kind of thing. And it was good. And that was it. It was kind of cold and distant, but I'm not one that necessarily wants or need that kind of hand-holding that some people need. And this is not a critique of hand-holding, but just to say, I know who it is that I am in the world. Just show me what to do. I'll do it. Peace out. Leave me alone kind of thing. And so it was good. I did flunk out that first semester and had to go to another community college. So there's a transcript on record somewhere with like 2 Fs and a D. Mainly because like I went to that college with my then high school sweetheart. We kind of broke up midway through. The community college was far from home. It took me like about an hour and a half to 2 hours to get there by bus. And I was just kind of like, why am I going here? It's far when there's like, I'm passing about 6 schools to get here. And so I kind of stopped going and didn't care. And then just went to a new community college, got the same piece of paper, and went from those 2 Fs and Ds to, A's really quickly. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Awesome. I think for me, I had a little experience because once I got admitted to the University of New Mexico had a program called the College Enrichment Program aimed at students of disadvantage. So they brought us to campus during the summer and simulated over 2 weeks what it was like to live in the dorms and go to class and sort of like a head start. So I had that piece of it. But for me, more than anything, it was an issue of trust, okay? Because I had gone to barrio schools all my life, okay? What I learned in high school in particular is that if you were smart, you were a target. So my way to get through high school was to be invisible, okay? I mean, I didn't want the hoods coming after me. I didn't want to be a target. So I was just invisible. I only had to go to high school 3 years because of junior high, so 10, 11, 12. And so I graduated from high school, go to college, and it took me a long time, months, to understand that this was a place where it was okay to be smart and for that smartness to be valued. Okay, because I'd gone to barrio schools where if you were smart, you were just a target. So I just kept that hidden away. Okay, I still had a tough time. My first semester was okay. By second semester, the girlfriend thing, the same thing. My second semester GPA, we'd gotten together and broken up like 5 times. But I think my GPA, before finally I was done, But I think my GPA that semester was 0.75, which was a D in swimming and F in everything else. Okay, so I got put on academic probation and had to pull it back together. And at least the school gave me a shot, because at that time, this was in the late 70s. In New Mexico, there was no such thing as a community college. You either went to university or you went to the technical vocational school. That was all there was.
Right.
Okay. So I'd never heard of a community college till I transferred to ASU, and I was making friends, and everybody came from a community college. Finally, I had to ask, well, what's a community college? I'd never heard of it. Okay.
Right.
So that was a learning experience for me. Yeah, so I think transferring was the best thing that happened to me, because it gave me a new start. When you transferred to ASU at the time, ASU had academic renewal, so your credits counted, but your grades did not. So I started over GPA-wise, and that made a big difference for me. I did a lot better second time around. It's sort of a new start.
If I could,
Yeah,
you said
yeah.
the hoods made you a target?
Yeah.
Because that was opposite for me. Like, the gangs completely left. They're like, leave him alone. It's smart cuz. He's going off to do things.
Oh, wow.
But literally,
You were
I
lucky,
had a
man.
group of
You were
gang
lucky,
members
yeah.
who called me smart cuz. Like, leave smart
Smart
cuz alone.
cuz,
He doing a school thing. I was protected by quite a few gang members.
Mine, I used what I call the scorpion strategy, which is don't pick on me, because I'm just not worth it. I'll fight this out to the hilt. And so they would leave me alone, but they would like take it out of my car. I had this old beat up car. It was already old and beat up. It was a '66 Chevy Malibu. Okay,
Hilarious.
but they would kick in the doors, break my antenna, break pens on my hood, stuff like that.
Yeah, like I did speech and debate in high school, and our gangs actually, like we didn't get enough funding from the public high school. Literally, we would ask for like students to pitch in. It was always they were selling drugs. If we're just being honest. But they were the ones who were funding trips to go and compete in speech and debate. They was like, yo, they doing it, cuz
That's
they
cool,
living
that's
life.
cool, yeah.
And so gang members often protected us in a lot of ways.
Wow,
They left the smart
wow.
ones alone. Leave them
I
alone.
didn't have that luxury, that's for sure.
Wow.
It's I always tell that story because we think of gangsters as these completely vile and violent human beings, and there's these other sort of narratives that attach to them, like especially the narrative, like, and I'm not saying yours was incorrect, but I think about how often that narrative is told, where the gangsters are picking on the smart ones, and I'm like, but there's also these other things that happen too.
Oh no, you're right. They're their own social institutions that have their good too. I mean, yeah, I would agree with that.
Yes.
Yeah. Speech and debate being funded that way. Oh my God!
Wow, that's interesting.
So
Wow.
Yeah,
Someone
they
who used to do
literally,
speech
like,
and
we used to put on these events, like we would do
Yeah.
a mock debate for the campus in the auditorium or in the library, and then we would talk about, we have this big tournament coming up where this short, if you can, you can, if you can't, you can't, kind of thing. Students and parents would be there, and often the largest donation came from gang members. And
that's
I'm
cool.
absolutely certain I'm aware of where that money comes from.
man, what a world! That's awesome. Next question before we get to some of the family dynamics here is what or who influenced what you majored in?
Oh. So for me, somewhere a little background before we, like you said, we get into the family stuff. But this is my 6th year on campus, so I've taken all 6 years to complete undergrad. But this is attesting to being a first-gen student as well. I didn't know what I was doing on this campus whatsoever for the first good 4 years. I started off as a pre-social work major when I first came in back in 2014, and from there I bounced from social work to psychology to theater. I was a film major, and I went back to social work, but I couldn't pass math. So then I am now a communication major, and this is what I'll be finishing out my undergrad with. And I think what influenced me was the way I grew up. My parents were always in the community, helping out. They always throw picnics for the family down Lorenzi Park. I know you guys are just new here, but the Lorenzi Park is kind of like down on the west side. Mm-hmm. It's a predominantly Hispanic and Black populated park, but my family would always throw events for people to just come out to. And I think doing that, knowing how much the community has helped me as well, I just wanted to give back. So I guess you can say Vegas kind of influenced my my decision in my major of being in social work. So I think I do want to go into grad school. So once I do pursue my master's, I want to go back to social work and just once again just be an asset to the community.
Nice. Yeah. I like that, though. I like the fact that you tried a ton of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't think enough students try a ton of things. Just go figure it out.
You said like that
Yeah.
dominant narrative of like you have to pick a major by year one,
like-
and then
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I, as a professor, I feel like this is about exploration above anything and
Yeah.
everything
Yeah.
else. Like, go try it and see what works for you, and see what
Right.
you hate, and see what you love, and you never know.
Yeah.
That's me. Whatever. No. So what influenced my major has teachers always. So in high school, there was a teacher named Florence Avignon who eventually won California Best Teacher of the Year award. The golden apple, whatever, platinum apple, whatever color apple that award is. And I remember when she was up for it and they asked me to write a letter, I literally stopped everything that I was doing in my life and I wrote this woman a 5-page letter about how incredible she was. I was one of those students. I could have finished in 3 years, though. I started in the 9th grade. I think I was the first class of incoming 9th graders for high school. And I finished in 3 years. I actually had enough credits, finished all of my courses, because what I was doing was I was taking like summer courses. I took 2 courses every summer. And so by the end of my 11th grade summer, I actually had enough credits to finish. But I say all of that to say, in my summer year from 10th going to the 11th, I took my 11th grade history, and I met this history teacher named Florence Avignon, a black woman who taught at Crenshaw Senior High School. And the way she taught history, we did a lot of mock trials, and we did Plessy v. Ferguson. And at that time, it was the last predominantly black high school in Los Angeles. And I had the honorable task of representing the white man who denied access to the train in the last predominant black. Of course, I lost the case, but right, she made these I made arguments that apparently was really good for her, and she was like, I want you to come try the speech and debate team, and I was of course concerned with my image. No, you're crazy.
Yeah.
She was like, please, and I was like, okay, yes, I'll do it, just to get her to leave me alone. And I didn't sign up for the class nor the club, and she actually visited my math class and called me out of class and said, where were you? And she essentially told me, sign up. I said, okay. Well, she had to come back the next day because I didn't again. And she goes, I'm literally going to come back every day until you do this. This is my off period. And I was like, okay, this woman's insane. So I did it. And she said, do one tournament. And if you hate it, you'll get an A out of this class. You will never have to do anything again. And, of course, I did the tournament. I loved it. And so that put me on the path to start doing speech and debate, and then in college, I actually did speech and debate as in community college for El Camino. And I say all of this to say, generally speaking, a lot of people who do speech and debate end up in communication studies majors, as I'm sure you know quite well. And so it was kind of a laid out path for me in that respect. And then I went to Cal State LA, did it. But then I met teachers there, and they told me my focus was wrong. Like, comm is fine, but I was focusing on rhetoric and performance studies. As an undergrad, I was public relations. And they go, I think that's not your focus. And I met folks like Bryant Alexander, who's now at Loyola Marymount, and Judith Amara, who's now at Princeton. These were my advisors, and they, sort of urged me to look at other fields. And I did rhetoric and performance studies as a grad student, which then sent me over to Northwestern to get a PhD in performance studies. And so it was literally just a series of teachers just kind of seeing something in me, going, I want you to kind of think about this, and that's what it was.
Excellent.
Mine were influenced by 2 things mainly. One, I was very mercenary about the degree. If I'm going to go to school and put all this time and effort, it's got to pay. Okay. And then 2, the second influence was, can I get through the curriculum? Okay. Because I'm the guy that did 5 majors and transferred once and still managed to graduate in 6.5 years. Okay. I mean, I started engineering. I couldn't hack the math. Okay. So I switched to architecture. I liked architecture, but the studio criticism was brutal. Didn't have the ego for it. So that ended that. So then I switched to general business. And so I applied to the business school at UNM, because at UNM you had to be in university college, then transfer to the business school. And so I didn't have the GPA, so they denied me. Okay, so I went and talked to them to see, like, the appeal process, whatever. They said basically no, So that's when I applied to ASU, and I got it. And at UNM you needed, I think, like a 3.0 to get into the business school, and I had like a 2.1, so it wasn't going to happen. But ASU admitted me, and they admitted me direct to the business college. Okay, so I went as a general business major, and I switched to advertising, marketing, and then in that general business curriculum, you take the first 2 accounting classes, 101 and 102, and I found I had a knack for it. Okay, I mean, it wasn't math intensive like engineering and architecture, but it had enough math that I could survive. So I went up switching to engineering and graduating with switching to accounting and graduating with an accounting degree. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So then I think that took So I said 6.5 years. So when, you said 6 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're doing good, okay? Because I'm the guy that's been to school in my life, okay? The master's degree took me 9 years because by then I had small kids, one class
Wow.
at a time, okay?
Right,
And the
right.
doctoral degree's taken me 10 years.
Okay.
I'm ABD now, but because I had teenagers and kids in college.
Nice.
Yeah. Love that we're all bound here by the exploration of it all, and like in various ways. Either in terms of the majors that we select, or like go in between of it, and even just like being told to find a different focus or like find different areas to focus on. I was kind of in that boat too in terms of having high school teachers who were really encouraging. Margaret Walsh and Paul Graber, my English and history/government teachers respectively. They were just so invested in us and so invested in our success, and it was just really nice to have that in my corner, to have them in my corner, and I'm so grateful for them for propping me up, and for really showing us better versions of ourselves. And that was also the case with being at my comm program for my BA and MA at Cal State Northridge, and I owe a great deal of it to my mentor Peter Marston, who was really just an invested teacher who placed care for his students like first and foremost, and that's like the kind of care that I hope I don't think I'll ever emulate from him or can ever reach, but it's something that I strive for, that I strive for in and out of the classroom. And so it's really great to hear everyone's reasons for the majors that you chose, and it's really exciting to hear that and to share in that with you all. So I'd love to chat now about our family dynamics after starting college. And so what was it like in terms of early challenges that may have come up in our family structures when we started college?
To relate to your testimony as well about your GPA. So my first semester, my GPA was about a 1.2. Second semester, I also flunked it, and they sent me the letter of being kicked out. And from there, and hopefully my mom doesn't see this, but I never told her that I almost flunked out of college. I think it was more so like a pride thing, because being a first-gen student, they put a lot of pressure on me, being the oldest as well, to accomplish this feat and to go far in life. I guess you can just broadly paint it. So, like a really big challenge that I had was trying to not only stay prideful, but also stay on task and focus. Going through all those different majors, and also trying to pass all these classes. It put a lot of stress on me, losing family members, things of that nature. But I never once just told my mom and dad that I was going through these struggles. I think because I didn't want them to feel as if I couldn't accomplish this, as this was an achievable goal. So even with them being in Vegas, like I would go on and see them. I would say, hey, like I'm doing good, everything's fine. I'll be graduating this year. No, it got pushed back. I'll be graduating this year, and so on and so forth, until I finally kind of broke down to them and told them, like, hey, had switched majors a couple of times, but this is the year that I'm graduating. I'm done. It took 6 years, but I'm finally going to finish this. So it's been kind of back and forth, a little tug and pull, but it's been good.
Yeah, nice.
My experience with family has mostly been good. I think, there's a narrative out there that suggests that, as we enter into the institution, the higher learning institutions, that, our families have a certain level of estrangement from us, this certain level of distance. And I do think part of that is often done by the student themselves, right? This way in which I remember coming home thinking I just knew more than everyone. Right? Mm-hmm. And how that alone sort of creates this kind of weird sort of relationship, right? Sure, I might know more about this area of study than anyone else in my family, but to sort of take that and bring that back as if I know more, it sort of rests on this assumption that the institution has the premium on knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. That there's no other ways of knowing and being in the world that are more valuable or valid than higher academia, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that was sort of probably some of my first books, but my family has been largely supportive in all of the ways they can. One of my younger cousins had gone to my PhD graduation in Chicago, And he's now in his sophomore year in college. And he was young then, and he was like, he had just told me, we were talking via text not too long ago about his experience in college now, and he was like, honestly, it's tough, I don't like a lot of stuff. He goes, but I remember seeing you at the graduation, and it makes me want to push. And I was like, oh, wow. And that was literally the first time he had ever told me that. And it had been years since that happened. And so we had to have conversations around that. From, that to family just throwing celebrations because they know I just got another milestone, whatever that was, even if they weren't always fully aware of precisely what that milestone was, or, just kind of just verbal support. It's been largely good.
Awesome. Oh, yeah.
I think for me it's been a mixed legacy. I think like you, I went through a period where we'd go to family events and they'd say something ignorant and I'd feel compelled to correct them, and that created some resentment in the family. And my wife had to counsel me, finally tell me, you don't need to educate them. They can do that on their own. You're just creating resentment. Okay, which was true. Okay, so I had to learn to shut up. Okay, but I didn't have a lot of family support. One, because they couldn't afford it, and two, I was pretty much on my own anyway. So that created some distance, but being Latino families, you sort of take the ups and downs together, and we're still a family. I think where that dynamic began to show more was in the next generation. We experienced something I didn't expect at all, and that was that as I got promoted at the university and our income rose, we started to really outpace the rest of the family, and so my kids grew up professional class kids and went to really good schools. And my brother's kids did not. They stayed stuck in the barrio, okay? And that created this dynamic where the cousins would take it out on my kids because they were jealous, particularly on my daughters, okay? And that created a rift in the family that, in terms of that generation, still hasn't healed to this day, yeah. And it's nothing. It wasn't anything my kids were doing. In fact, I was coaching them to reach out to your cousins, be nice, say hi to them first, because the perception was they were rich kids and they were stuck up because we lived across town, kind of thing,
Right.
Never mind that my kids are the product of what I put into them, not they had no choice in the matter, okay.
Right.
But it created that dynamic that still exists today. There's still that rift.
I think about that. So my brother has two daughters now, and my younger brother actually eventually he went the military route and had that paid for school. Then he got his MBA at USC. And so, him and his wife and their two children are financially fine. But then we also have siblings who are not. And we talk about that a lot as a collective family, like what that means. I think I didn't really touch upon the financial stuff because my family also didn't have the means to financially support me through college. But what it does create these weird sort of class gaps and structures within the family, much so after. I know my brother and I, we try to do an incredible amount for our siblings' children.
Yeah, see
We try from everything to not even just buying gifts, but like I take them on like cultural things. Like let's go to museums, let's see things. I took my two nieces to an expensive restaurant for the first time in their life, and they didn't even they were blown away by so much. But these are things that my two brothers' children, and the day I do have children, will be able to experience as a normal engagement. Whether my other nieces and nephews are kind of like, the hell is this world? And so we have to have, I think what we did a lot, and we're not perfect and we make mistakes too, and there are tensions too, but I think we do have these open and active conversations about the class dynamics even within our own family.
And I think that leads to another aspect of this that I didn't anticipate, which is you wind up, because you're the college educated one, you wind up being the family go-to person when something happens.
Counselor,
you got a counselor, writer,
every time someone passes in my family, I have to write the thing, and I'm like, do I get to mourn too?
Yes, yeah.
Like I'm also hurting, and I have to write
Yeah. Debt collector, debt settler. I've played attorney. I'm an accountant. I've solved tax problems. I even it took us 3 years, but I even got my brother out of prison through the appeals court process. Okay, stuff I never anticipated.
I'm on my mother's everything. So like literally, like we have it's me and 5 other siblings, right? And I am the one whose name is on everything. My mother goes, "I trust that you'll handle it."
Yeah, exactly. That's the pressure. I hear
you. I'm honored on some level, but on another level, I'm like, Jesus. When you pass, the last thing I want to think about is handling it.
Yes, I hear you.
Well, it's interesting.
It's all this just being at the center of this in terms of our educational upbringing. It's so crazy, and it's so daunting to hear. So I'm curious in terms of the perceptions you faced as a student, or the experiences as a student, or currently or formerly. Could you share what your experiences have been like with diversity in various classrooms? And this could be in current roles as a student, or even as a faculty member or as an administrator. What is it that you see in terms of diversity, especially here at our institution?
I'll say for me, in terms of faculty, and Dr. Flores is currently one of my comp professors. He is the first person of color that I've had as a professor. And it's shocking too, because he's also, and congrats to you, he's also one of the smartest professors I've ever had as well, because of the knowledge that he brings as a person of color, just the conversations that he has with us. It opens up an entirely new dialogue. And in terms of in the classroom, like I said, I've been here for 6 years. My current fiance, we're both African American, and we've had a couple classes together as well. And I can tell you a couple of times that we've been the only African American people in those classrooms. It's been an experience, because it is a diverse campus, not as diverse as it may paint itself to be, but it is diverse. There's other campuses that are predominantly white, but I would say the diversity has helped in my educational upbringing, and also just my life experience as well. Being able to see different people, different cultures, and being able to communicate with these people and learn about their lives, being Latino, Latina, Latinx, and also just Pacific Islanders, stuff like that. So it's been helpful, I think I would say. I've learned a lot, because growing up, in Providence, and being on the west side of Las Vegas, I have had nothing but like black friends. So having these different friends and learning these different people has helped a lot.
Yeah. So I first and foremost hate how universities talk about diversity with like almost every fiber of my being. It is often more of an advertisement tool. We talk about the quantity of different people on campus, but rarely do we actually engage in a material way the quality of how those folks operate and move on campus. And it just frustrates and angers me to my core. We're an HSI at UNLV. But the number of faculty that reflect that it doesn't, right? And the higher you go up in admin, as I'm sure you can tell me better than I could tell myself, the less and less people of color, the less and less women, the less and less queer folk, the less and less. It just continually higher you up, you generally go white and male. That's how it functions. And there's just so much that I could literally ramble on for years about this topic. I could talk about the fact that we are claiming to be the most diverse institution for our class in the country, yet our mascot is still troubling for me. We just kind of got to be honest about that, and we don't want to be honest about that. And I don't know how to feel safe in an institution that won't value the voices of people that's saying this is violent towards me. One that will not come out openly and just sort of adamantly just refuse white supremacy as a normal functioning thing that happens on this campus. And it's not just here. I don't even want to paint UNLV to be the worst institution in the world, because I don't think it is. But I do think that universities in general talk about the quantity of different people on campus. Rarely do they engage real material discussions about the quality of how folks move on campus. We can only start to chart the numbers of where monies go to for departments to talk about how they actually value diversity, right? It's one thing to say diversity and to put it on a brochure, but where does the money go, right? Where does attention to, how do we retain faculty of color and staff of color? You bring in one black professor and expect him to be all of the black experience, and that's daunting and exhausting, and I pull out and I want to go elsewhere because that's not fair to me. It's not fair to me when every black student come to my office and want me to mentor them, and that's not that's not seen as valid service on my tenure profile, right? And whereas my white colleagues don't have to do that work, but I do that work regardless because I remember being the black student that went to my black professor who saved me. And so I can go on for years and really paint a broad stroke of how I think universities they care about diversity in a sort of aesthetic way. But I want us to care about it in a material and meaningful and impactful way where students feel valued. And even when you are the only, black student in the class, I think about the oftentimes when that happened to me before where I was asked to teach black studies and I was like, I'm taking this class. I'm not being paid. When we talk about race and everybody looks to me and I'm looking around too, like I am also a student here. But I think about what does it mean to have a professor that's versed enough that actually had to go through training to think about those things so that kind of pressure isn't put on you, right? I think about this in all kind of ways. I think about the fact that I am literally asked to do associate level work at an assistant level pay and protection because, who else were they going to get? Because there's like a handful of black faculty members on campus. Right, and I could go on for hours on this topic, but I do hate with every bit of me how we actually talk about diversity on college campuses.
That's powerfully said. It's needed as well, yeah.
I would modify that a little bit. I think I came from an institution, University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. It's a high Hispanic serving institution as well, but it's very Latino non-minority. Okay, the African American community and the Asian community aren't big populations in New Mexico, and so it creates this huge tension within the university that I had to live with for 32 years. It's never directly addressed. You feel it in terms of, for example, even after 32 years, my pay at my grade and rank was still less than my non-minority counterparts. Okay, with less seniority. Okay, I mean stuff like that still exists to this day. And I come to UNLV, and given that diversity here is a much broader spectrum, I feel is better embraced than the institution I came from. Okay. Okay. Is it perfect? No. I like you. I was put off by the Rebels mascot, for the exact same reasons, But I figured, well, it's a job and it pays more than where I came from, so I'm going to take it, sort of thing. But that was one of the things that, in my perception, when I was evaluating, do I come to UNLV or not, was that mascot. And then
it weighed on me too.
And then finding out that diversity is actually better and more embraced here than when I came from, I think for me was a relief.
I think it's interesting that you guys bring up the mascot. Not to get off track of what we're discussing, but
it matters.
Yeah, it definitely does. As a student, it's interesting hearing from faculty about the mascot and how it weighed in on your guys' decision to come to UNLV. It wasn't, because I have a lot of friends that came from, my high schools too that went to UNLV. It never was a discussion for us about, attending UNLV, the mascot and, what it actually symbolizes. It was just okay, we're going to UNLV. That was pretty much it. And now, so many years later, and, all the knowledge that we've learned about the world and, about, where we are, now it's such a big thing for us. So it's just interesting seeing how things have changed for us.
I'll tell you, I recruited a colleague from Cal State Fullerton to come to UNLV to serve as our director of program development. She's Asian American. She questioned the mascot too during the interview process when I was talking to her. What her take on that was. So it's definitely out there in the community that here's an institution that appears to value diversity and has is making progress in that regard, but it has this mascot that is anti-diversity.
When we just hired an AFAM this past year, in African American Studies, I was chairing the AFAM search, and we just hired in it, and every interviewee we had talked about the mascot. Yes. And they were asking how much can the university actually value diversity and still claim that this mascot is viable.
Exactly.
What was Mississippi? They were the Rebels too,
They
right?
were the Rebs,
They were the Rebs, right? Mississippi?
Ole Miss,
I think so,
Ole Miss.
Yeah.
They got rid of it.
Yeah. But they kept the Confederate flag,
They
though.
kept the Confederate flag, but you see
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Mississippi, and we like to think Mississippi is this kind of bastion of race, and I hate that argument too. But we like to think of it as that, and even Ole Miss, with all of its not as a state, Ole Miss is an institution with its
Yeah.
particular robust history of racism. Said, let's change some of it.
Mm-hmm. And I appreciate that the threads of this discussion is about diversity is never something that's perfected, and it's not a thing to pick up and put down, but diversity just kind of is. It's part of our fabric, right? And it's something it's not apprehendable. It's something that we experience, that we live, that we, as you were mentioning, like we have to like really carefully examine like the quality of how we move throughout the world.
And reckon with it, right? Like, so I teach courses, when I do teach courses in African American studies, like one of the things I'm trying to get students to think about is what does it mean to look at the world through like sort of a critical black lens, right? Which is a kind of different way of thinking in the world, right? And like we're all sort of altered by sort of our identities and how it is that we move through the world with those identities. And so what does it mean that the institution might not value, and as a broad sort of, the institution as a broad sweeping thing, might not value black ways of knowing in the world, right? And that too is a part of diversity, to value different ways of knowing and how those different bodies move. So not just that we have X amount of percent of this group of people or that group of people or this, but we actually value how those people know and see the world. Is important in terms of diversity discussions.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank y'all for sharing. This is really generative, really insightful. So, what would you say in terms of the experience being first gen as a student, as a faculty member, as an administrator? What would you say helped you find success as formerly or currently as a first generation student, or in your current role as a first generation faculty member or administrator?
I would say. So what's helped me find success?
Yeah.
Okay.
What like how in your own movement through this institution have you found success, or what are some ways that have helped you, things that have helped you succeed?
I would say once again, like my support group, as far as like my friends and my peers on campus, and also my fiance as well. I'd say because she's super smart, and she's the one that it keeps me on task and keeps me focused as far as my classwork and being on top of things. I would say that a lot of people have helped like towards success. I think once you're in and this isn't for everyone as well. Like this it's on a case by case basis. But I think once you're in that circle of people who are trying to achieve the same goal of being a college graduate, I think it kind of helps push you towards that same goal. For me, if it wasn't for them, without a doubt, I would not be here. Once again, like they are 100% to credit for my success. My professors, my peers, once again, my fiance, like parents, even like they without them, I wouldn't be here. So it definitely has helped a lot having that group of people to support you.
Yeah, same community, right? In various capacities, be it family. So much of how I move through the world is driven by the fact that I want to make my mom proud. Literally, like it's so simple, but that's so much of my motivation is that my mom calls me and goes, "Oh, I'm so proud of you." And I'm like, "Oh, thank you." And that's everything I need in the world, right? Because even before she married my stepfather, I was raised by a single mother, and so much of my drive is an attempt to give back, right? Like I think about, I mean, I could go on for years about this too, but like part of it is like I travel through this world a lot as a lecturer, as a performer, and I leave the country maybe 4 times a year. My mother has left once in her entire life, and so my mother opened up a world for me that refused to open itself up for her, and so I'm constantly like, how do I give back? And so, if that means making you proud, if that means you're getting on this plane and you're coming with me somewhere, whatever that means, but it's so much of that. But then also, that drove me a large amount as a student, but also what drove me as a student too was faculty members were finding spaces. We had a Pan-African Student Union where literally we used to just go in and hang out most of the time we sat there and listened to music and played Madden football on, and that was it. But like I found people that looked like me that wanted to argue about things that I wanted to argue about, and not argue about them in the sense of a contestation, but in the sense of like we're both trying to find the truth of this, and I don't agree with you, but I love that you're trying, that kind of thing, right? Like be like, how do we get us free, right? Kind of thing. And then as a faculty member, I am a part of quite a bit of sort of faculty communities across the country for young black faculty. So there's all these sort of communities. So like when I do have a problem that arise, I can just send it to my email group of people, and I get people who've been there before that said this worked at my institution, this didn't, this didn't, this didn't, and you begin to go, okay, so while I might be one of a few here, I'm one of many nationally and internationally, and I can then lean on that. And this has become the magic of the internet, right? The ways in which they make far people feel close. And so these sort of various communities, which again is a testament to the history of how black folks survived in this country, is literally finding community and making community work in the face of black antagonisms, in the face of the history of this country and how it is that it treated us.
I think I had two major motivators. My first motivator was fear of failure. Okay, I just, after investing all this time and effort and money, I didn't want to fail, because I'd get up, I'd take classes in the morning, I'd work my work-study job 1 to 5, I'd work my night job, I'd go study, then I'd start all over again the next day. I'm like, I don't want all this to be for nothing. So I think that was the first major motivator. And then once I had a family, it was to set the example for my kids. Okay.
Good.
That they have a better life, that I propel them to a better life than I have had, and we laugh about them, because I tease them. I says, I'm not doing this out of the goodness of my heart. I'm investing in you, and my payback is I want to live in your pool house. Okay? And we laugh about it, but I tell them I'm building a family dynasty here, for the benefit of the next generation, and we laugh and kid about it. But there's an element of seriousness to it too.
Yeah, I'm on that same boat with my mom too. Just making my dad proud, and especially building that sort of like sense of legacy for like my nieces, especially. Like I don't particularly like push things like college on them, but like if there's ever a time where they want to do college, like I'm here. Like let's get you going. Like let's get.
I'm saying I don't push college either, but if you want to,
I'd say
let's go for it.
It has to be that individual choice.
I do push you doing good at what you want to do, though.
Yeah,
let's
you're right.
figure out what you want to do, and we'll jump in.
Yeah, but it's especially thinking about it in terms of like making our communities proud, and like knowing the communities and the places we grew up from and grew up within. And so I think that's really valuable to know that. What would you recommend to first generation students or faculty in terms of finding spaces for success in higher education? What recommendations did you have, or in your case, Tavion, what would you ask of other faculty in terms of creating spaces for students to succeed?
Man, like I said, it's once again, shout out to Kamisha, because I feel like, because we've had many of talks throughout these 6 years, and it's been sometimes like she's taken me out on lunch just to talk to me about like how I'm doing at home, how I'm doing out, just in the world. And I feel like that's definitely beyond her pay grade. Like, she doesn't have to do that. She can just tell me, hey, here's these classes you have to take, here's how you graduate, like, go. She's done so much more going beyond and all of that. I would say we just need more people like that on campus. Like, I'm not here to bash anyone's name or bash professors or faculty or any of that sort, but I just think that a lot of professors and faculty here are just here to get a check, are here to be paid, are here to just teach this curriculum, and okay, I'll see you next Wednesday. Like that for someone like me or someone like a first-gen student, that's not sufficient enough, I would say. It doesn't help us at all as far as just navigating all of this, like this. For me, like, because I've taken tours of different campuses, like I've been to UCLA, and seeing how massive it is, like I couldn't imagine being in that space. Like I don't know what I would do if I was there. But just there's this world of college is so big, and it's taken me such a long time to find, just who I am within with this space and what I want to do with this degree. So I just wish that if I would have had a group to guide me through that process, that definitely would have helped, just finding myself here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the current iteration, and I'm going to flip the question, but I'm going to answer it. But in the current iteration of the how institutions function, I would say find community is my simple way, and that's not always the easiest thing to do. Be that community of students, be that community of faculty, community of staff, whatever that community is, like be it a center like Intersections, whatever that community is, find that community, right, and sort of nestle in that space and move about that way, right? But I want to flip the question because I don't think it's so much what we do, but so much as how institutions need to change to make the space more viable, at least in my humble opinion. In the sense of, like, you talked about faculty being here, needing, and I imagine there are people like that. I'm not going to sit here and defend all I can't do that work. That would be absurd of me. But it is to say that sometimes the work that they put on faculty is so daunting that it seems like what they're doing is just getting a check. But in reality, they're attending to many of the other parts of the job that does not allow, like, I just don't have the time to sit there and have lunch with students. Like, I just don't. I wish I did. I would actually prefer that over some of the stuff that I have to do. I really fundamentally, but then it's also about university resources. USC, which has way more resources than we do. A postdoc there literally gave me a card that had $500 on it every semester that I could spend to have lunch with students.
Wow.
Go late, let's go have lunch.
Schools,
Swipe it, boop, boop. We eat lunch, we talk. Talk about class, we can talk about life, we can talk about whatever. But that's also about that institution is resource heavy, right? So I'm thinking about, like, how institutions need to change. I'm thinking about resources. I'm thinking about this as not a simple fix, but as a kind of multi-pronged thing. But in the current iteration, the best thing I can say is find community.
Community, definitely.
I guess I would ask two things. For students, that students persist, okay? Yeah, you got your butt kicked, but you got up and you went back for more, okay?
Yeah.
More than anything, okay? And then I guess the faculty, and you allude a lot to this, is that more mentorship of students occur. Because one of the greatest predictors of college success for students is somebody at the institution cared for them. And it was particularly critical for me in the master's program and the doctoral program. I don't think I'd have finished it without that support, okay? And I think that's going to be an institutional change that the institution has to change so that mentorship is valued as part of the tenure process.
And I'd say even not only just into the tenure process, but I think even just every day to day. Like, like if my professor didn't tell me, like, hey, like, you should apply for grad school, like, I think you'd be really great. I don't know if I'd be here. Like, and I've told 3 folk in the last 2 weeks, hey, have you considered grad school? You know, like, writing on their assignment or just approaching them. Like, I think, like, you would be really cut out for this. And I think part of that mentorship note and part of, like, establishing communities are so important because they're really undervalued. But then also there's really an important point to think about how we can have the institution play a vital role in shaping the success or levels of success for first-gen students, first-gen faculty.
Yeah, I mean, we know simple fact, like, you have to, if you bring in, like, we know faculty of color, particularly black and brown faculty, do well when you bring them in at multiple times, like bring in multiple faculty in at once, as opposed to bringing in one, because now I have community.
Yeah.
Now I don't have to do everything myself, or at least feel like I have to do everything myself. We know that's true of students. They now have all kind of programs around the country that you might know of more than I do, where they're bringing in groups of students at once from locations where they hang out summer, similar to your sort of experience. So we know that community actually works, but we need the resources to have those communities. We need centers, even more like Intersections, larger spaces that actually are more resourced, that house students, that give them the kind of advice that the advising center is not always equipped to do. Right, and I'm one of those people that says we need more advising centers. We just need more. Right?
Yeah, that's very transactional as opposed to more mentorship.
Yeah, definitely. So as we start bringing our time here to a close, we've had a lot of discussions and shared a lot of stories in terms of first generation upbringings, where we're currently at now, where we're hoping to go. And so I'm curious to know if there's anything else that we all would like to share, like to close out on with that hasn't been discussed or covered previously. And huge gratitude to you all for sharing space today and being a part of this endeavor. So.
I would just say that I'm glad I went. I'm glad that I'm here. I'm glad that I decided to better my life with pursuing higher education. I have a lot of friends that are just in the workforce, kind of just going day by day, check by check. And I think for me, yeah, I'm graduating in communications, minoring in marriage and family therapy. But for me, I do want to pursue grad school, and that's been talked to me by a lot of people now as my undergrad comes to a close. And I think once I do pursue my master's, I want to do something that can just benefit. Once again, we talk about community a lot. Just benefit the community, benefit Las Vegas, benefit the youth. That's my biggest focus, because it's cliche, but the youth are the future. They're the ones that's going to be taking care of us when we're old. So I want to be sure that I give back to them and bring them up just in better ways than I was brought up. I don't know. It's near and dear to my heart that I take whatever I've learned here in these 6 years and my higher education going forward and give back to the people.
I think I've said it all. Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah.
I think what I'd say is that I remain optimistic for the future. I mean, from when I started college in the late 70s, where we sat in the back of the room if you were a minority, to now, the institutions have come a long way. Do we have a long way to go still? Yes, but I do see that progress over the last 34 years.
Yeah, definitely along that same lines of being optimistic, and there's so much more to talk about with this, but I'm glad that we have opportunities to share these spaces and to have those discussions, and so I'm thankful for all of you for this chance and this opportunity to have this conversation.
Thank you.
So thanks
Thank
so
you.
much.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.